a huge amount of people have totally bought that idea that you need carbs to retain
Ah,
sodium somehow. It's like he started having cramps. Look, I'm with Bart on this one. I really think that he was maybe over exercising, under eating protein, or maybe having meals that were too small somehow. That's
he was having small amounts of protein.
yeah.
When you have small amounts of protein, you get less taurine. Even when you
Hmm.
cook it, you get less
Yep.
taurine. Less taurine, less of an osmolyte, less ability to regulate your electrolytes. You're going to get into trouble. Now, you put in sugar, it increases your insulin. What it does is it causes more retention of electrolytes, the insulin. Voila, you've solved the problem. You've actually masked the problem and created a
Yep.
new problem called Randle cycle activation. So you fixed one issue and all that. This is the problem with standard keto diets. Not enough meat, not enough capacity to get enough taurine to regulate your intracellular fluids and the electrolytes of those fluids. That's the problem. This is evolutionary, indicated in research going back millions of years. Complex organisms. I should do that video. Um, I've got a study which goes through all the talks about. It goes into a lot of detail. It's a book thing. It's not really a study. It's a book thing. And what the book does is at explaining. It looks at explaining basically the purposes of taurine in different tissue types and all that, and how it's actually worked, and evolutionarily how it's come about, its evolutionary role, which is really important. A lot of people don't understand this. It's really, you know, what do you think I say that taurine is like this Swiss Army knife of the body? It's not accidental that I say this, because I know that it's so ancient and so important. And most people, because of processed foods and a lot of other things, are not getting enough these days and having a lot of derangements in their physiology due to that. A lot of people in the low carb community don't eat enough meat. And so, again, fearing mTOR, which, as I explained earlier, it's a non issue. But because they fear it, they don't get it. And then they have electrolyte issues and they blame the lack of sugar, and they do a full circle from one reductionist nonsense to another. And eventually they go all way back to carbs when they left carbs in the first place,
Yep.
just because they didn't get enough protein. You look at the tribal people, what do? They're all constantly, remember the Inuits sitting there and eating raw meat and cutting large pieces and giving to their kids and eating massive amounts? That's what people do in tribal societies. They don't use insulin to hold on to cause water retention, to hold on to electrolytes. Remember the video? I did a first video that I did ages ago with Pim Johnson. If you go to my playlist, there's the first video there that talks about the guidelines. I talk about the actual study that Walter Kempner did. Walter Kempner, because he knew that if you put in electrolytes with high carbohydrate and high insulin, what happens is you will get a situation where you have a lot of retention of minerals. You can't get rid of, excrete them. So he used to recommend on this high sugar diet, and he used to whip them to make sure they got enough calories, even raw sugar. And he basically, this is back in the 1930s when they didn't understand the Randle cycle. Philip Randle hadn't published until 1963. And so obviously he could see a benefit. He didn't know, he'd come out of Germany, he didn't know anything about the keto diet that was being run out of the 1920s from Johns Hopkins University Hospital. So he tried another method and realized quite clearly, if you don't take out the electrolytes because of the retention, the water retention, you will end up magnifying the fluid buildup inside the cells, and you can actually burst the cells. You can actually do damage to the cells. So what he did was he removed all electrolytes completely from the diet, no electrolytes, because he knew that the insulin would retain the fluid retention, and that would retain all those. It without requiring to consume any. This is why the fruitarians that eat a lot of sugar, the ones that eat excessive and don't waste away very fast initially, have no requirement. They don't take any electrolytes. Have you noticed? None whatsoever. Because they're running a much higher insulin, which actually is keeping their electrolytes, the ones that they've already had in their system. They do fall over time to a lower level, but they can still sort of function at a sort of a lower level. On a keto diet, you don't have the insulin. If you don't have enough taurine to regulate the kidneys to hold on to electrolytes, you'll dump far more. That's the problem. That is why a keto diet is not indicated long term in its traditional way it's put together with a high fat form. When there's sufficient, 30% protein as your general macros, 30% or more, you're still in ketosis, in a low grade of ketosis, but you don't have any electrolyte issues. Again, due to the osmotic effect of the taurine coming in from the animal food. That's what Salad Boy was doing wrong. And certain people have higher requirements than others due to genetics to achieve that osmotic effect. So there are variations on the requirements of taurine between people as well, because there is different rates at which you synthesize it from methionine, cysteine, taurine. Some people are better converters, synthesize more in their body, some less. So they need to get it from the diet, and that would depend on genetics. So you can have two carnivores doing the same macros and the one having electrolyte issues and the other not. Again, because of the internal endogenous biosynthesis is going to be different. There's a lot of factors at play always. There is, that's why I always say to people, what did your ancestors eat? Maybe it's a good idea that you did the same thing and you'd have less problems. So, and like the the Irish and their requirements for retinol and not carotenoids. Otherwise, they go very orangey in the skin. Yes, they glow like an orange, an unpeeled orange. Colourful, but not indicated. Mick the Vagoon, not indicated because he's Irish background.